fellas, radio and jazz ladies out there. This is your boy Satchel Armstrong, broadcasting live from the cabaret in the sky. And when I'm not busy doing my soloing on my two horn, I just tune in to the Artifice presents We All Be News and Radio. Oh, yeah.
Ask not what We All Be can do for you. Ask what you can do for We All Be.
And welcome, family, to another wonderful edition of the Artifice Presents We All Be News and Radio. It's the special Resurrection Day edition of We All Be Radio. We got a very special guest and also a very special subject matter. So please feel free to join in the discussion, whether it be in the chat room or you can call in at area code 646-652-4593. That's area code 646-652-4593. And today's topic, of course, is the truth about Mugabe, villain or hero, which is actually based on a documentary I have had the honor of seeing recently, the first weekend in March, rather, on behalf of an invitation from the Honorable Cynthia McKinney. And we got the documentary filmmaker and visionary on the line with us today. And once again, the documentary name, of course, is Mugabe, villain or hero, excuse me. And our today's guest is the director and filmmaker behind this very extraordinary piece of work, Brother Roy Agyemang. How you doing? Agyemang.
Brother Ron. You pronounced
Brother
it
Agyemang.
correctly the first time. Well done. Thank you.
All right, cool. I appreciate it. I know I'll be slaughtering the Queen's English, whatever. How you doing today, sir?
Oh, brother, I'm so happy to be on your show. I know we've been trying to work it out for a few weeks now, so I'm really, really happy to be on this holiday day. Hello to your listeners.
I think it's an honor to have you on, sir. I just want to get down to it. Like, what inspired you to do a documentary or a film feature about Robert Mugabe?
Well, it goes as far back as growing up in London as a young man. The images of Africa and African leaders had always been very, very negative, and that always impacted on how kids reacted towards me in a playground. So as a young child, I always wanted to say to my friends who are white and from the Caribbean islands, there's a lot more to Africans than being killed by Tarzan. And so I began working in media as a presenter, and then worked my way behind the camera. And so when I got the chance to look at Africa and look at the leadership of Africa, I jumped at it with two hands, because I always wanted to know the relationship between African leaders and Western leaders. How much has that got to do with Africa remaining poor? And so I wanted to look at that subject through the prism of Robert Mugabe. Now, here's a man that's been vilified in the Western media for the last 10 to 12 years, but yet he's still standing. Now, we all know once Western governments put their eye on a so-called dictator, they're usually eliminated within months. But here we have a man that's still standing, a man that was a Nobel Peace Prize nominee, a man that was knighted by the Queen of England, but all of a sudden he became a dictator. Why? And that kind of spurred me to find out what was more to behind what we've been seeing in the Western media, and that spurred me on.
So initially this project was going to take 3 months, correct?
Absolutely.
So what happened between, you know what I'm saying, we make plans and God laughs, that old saying, right? So what happened from 3 months to 3 years? How did it happen?
Well, I arrived in Zimbabwe in October 2007. Now, this was the time when, if people can remember, world record hyperinflation was happening on the ground. You had this huge regime change agenda when George W. Bush and the British Prime Minister Gordon Brown were trying to get rid of Mugabe. You had shortages of basic food commodities, and you had this kind of Western propaganda all on Zimbabwe. And here I was, coming from the UK, trying to get an interview with President Mugabe. They didn't trust me. There was just too much going on in the country for them just to say, okay, let's just give this guy an interview. So I had to stay on the ground. I had to gain the trust of the president and those around him before I actually could get in and penetrate the system. And that took a hell of a long time, because they've had people go to Zimbabwe before saying they're going to present one thing and present another. So the fact that I stayed the length of time that I did, the fact that I lived with them through their toughest time, economically since independence, gained a lot of credence. And obviously, being of Ghanaian heritage, that helped a lot because the president, his idol was Kwame Nkrumah, his first wife was a Ghanaian, and he has a lot of trust. He trusts Ghanaians. And so that really helped in me eventually getting an interview with the president, which I should add, Brother Ron, the first interview that we did, it took 2 years, almost 2 years to get the first interview. And then the following year, we ended up traveling around Africa with President Mugabe.
That's incredible, man. Wow, I mean, persistence really pays off. But you know, like things like this, like undertakings like this, we all know that money makes the world go round, at least make things a little bit easier for certain agendas. So how was you able to secure money for that long period of time? I mean, people always talk about having problems to finance projects like these.
This is the biggest and the toughest thing that really was the challenge of such a film. Thankfully, Brother Neville Hendricks, who's of Jamaican heritage, British guy based in London, supported me on this. Some years earlier, I had his back on a couple of projects in the UK, and he said to me, anything you want to do, I will support you on this. And so I went to him with this project on Mugabe, and I said, look, it's only going to take 3 months. He said, great, but it took 3 years. And the reason why he stuck with it is because he could see what was happening. He was in the UK while I was in Zimbabwe, and he would call me and say, what I'm seeing in the media is that they're killing journalists, people are dying left, right, and centre. I'm like, I'm here, I'm on the ground. That is an exaggeration. That's not happening at all. And he was like, well, there's your story. Because from what I'm hearing where I'm sitting, it's the opposite to what you're telling me. So there's your story. If you get the president, if you get an interview with the president, that's the icing on the cake. And he stuck with it. And he stuck by my side till today as I sit here in New York. You know, and there's not many brothers that would do that. We didn't want to go to the traditional outlets to get money because they would take control of this product, and maybe the film wouldn't be as balanced as it is. And so I can't thank Neville Hendricks enough for what he's doing and what he continues to do.
Yeah, well, how much does it end up costing? I mean, the budget. I mean, we always talk about movies and stuff, or in feature films they have a legendary budget overrun. So how much does it end up costing in all? I mean, just to make this movie.
And it's still going. The cost is still going because I'm traveling around getting the word out. And it's not like I've got traditional distribution as yet. That's the challenge. So in terms of US dollars terms, we're over $2 million. You know, for a documentary, that's a lot of money. But it's not a lot of money when you look at the subject matter and what the film is actually trying to say. The film is actually trying to articulate, not even trying, the film does articulate the issue of redistribution of wealth in Africa. You know, how do we get out of the quagmire that we're in? Here's an African leader that has been vilified because he's saying Africa for Africans. Now, that doesn't play well in the West or the Western media. So for me, the film, yes, there's a lot of money, but it's not even about that. It's about the message. It's about empowering blacks and Africans in the diaspora to say, hold on a minute, let's not follow or let's not believe what we've been told in the media about Africa and Zimbabwe and Robert Mugabe, and let's maybe support our leaders who have been vilified, because I think it's important that as the world looks to our resources, we need to maintain as much control as possible, and that's what the President Mugabe is basically saying. It's our land, and so therefore you can't come into our country and dictate the terms of agreements. And so he's standing up to the might of the West. But that gets hidden in the Western media. And so my film exposes that, and I think it's more than money, really.
Yeah, I mean, this is very important. I mean, like the fact that, first of all, spend that much money on a documentary, but the commitment you have to this, like it went from 3 months to 3 years, and to have people around you or certain people around you support you through thick and thin. This is very important work, because I know Brother Malcolm X always talks about the power of media influence on the minds of the masses. And you don't get this story, because when I understand, when I first heard about Robert Mugabe, all I knew was this black dude who allegedly was a dictator taking land from white people and giving it back to black folks. And the way they painted him was very interesting, because you contrast that. I think you did a great job of not necessarily vilifying or making him a hero, but you gave a very balanced perspective on this man and his legacy, and how people view him around the world as well as in the country. So what has been the reception of this movie in the homeland, in Zimbabwe, as well as around the world?
Brother Ron, the first screening was in December 2012 at the British Film Institute in London, and the reception was phenomenal. It was so heartwarming. You know, we had about 500-600 people in the auditorium, and they just gave 3 standing ovations. And that, for me, just made it all worth it, because there were people coming up to me saying, thank you. I wasn't aware of what was actually going on. And I thank you for putting more meat on the bone by explaining the other side and exposing the distortions in the Zimbabwean story. And from then on, it's just really spiraled on to another level. You know, Danny Glover's Film Festival in Los Angeles, the Pan-African Film Festival, invited me to screen in February. We screened 3 times there. I was awarded the Special Recognition Jury Award, which was massive for me. And then from there, I went to Selma, Alabama, the heart of the Civil Rights Movement, where I screened the film at the Jubilee event, which for me as a young guy growing up in London, it was just spiritually magnificent. And then, you know, screened it in Atlanta. I'm now in New York, had a great screening in Harlem. I also screened at NYU, which again was probably the most significant screening, because it's about the youth. It's about young people. It's about us guys saying, hold on a minute. The old guard have done their bit. Okay, we now need to take on the mantle and show the world that there's a lot more to Africa than what's being perceived. Show the correct image, because how Africa's being perceived on the TV is how people kind of react to us around the world, if that makes sense. You know, if they show this poverty and negativity, then you've got the world thinking these guys are just beggars. So it's up to us young guys to use this media and say, no, we're now going to present the correct image of Africa. And, you know, the old guys are not as mobile when it comes to the whole new media as we are. So we need to take that on. So in terms of the reactions that I'm getting, it's absolutely phenomenal. The other side to that, brother, on is this. The mainstream festivals, where all the big distributors are, have showed me no love. You know, not one of them, be it in Europe or be it in the States. But that's okay. That's expected. So you just have to re-strategize. You have to look at different models, and you have to go out there, as I'm doing. I'm prepared to go to every city, every state to get the message out there. And, you know, I ask people, when I travel around America, I ask people to jump on board, because this film is not about me. It's not just about President Mugabe. It's about Africa, and it's about black people as a whole coming together and say, hold on a minute, enough is enough. You know, let's tell our own stories, and let's rise up together.
That's very important what you said, because I keep on thinking about like the old guard and whatnot. I know that you did a pretty good job of actually in the documentary interviewing some of the native citizens of the country, even some of the youth. And I was surprised to hear about the young white people of the country, how they were more optimistic than what you are led to believe by the Western media in terms of the old guard. But since this is an important election year for President Mugabe, has the government reached out to you at all? I mean, what has been his response, or the government's official response to your documentary?
No, I delivered the DVD to the president in when was it? End of January. So I would imagine by now he would have seen it. His spokesman saw it and thought it was a very, very powerful piece. So I go to Zimbabwe in the next few weeks, and I will have feedback as to what the president himself thought about it. But the indication, and by all reports, they realize how powerful this artistic piece is. I'm getting Zimbabweans reaching out to me from all over the world and within Zimbabwe saying it's such an important film. You know, because usually what happens is we only praise our leaders when they're dead. But here we have one that's still living. And do we have to wait till he dies till we say, oh, actually, you know, he's not as bad as how they painted him? And so, no, I'm getting a lot of love from Africans around the world, African Americans and Africans in the diaspora and you know, in the Caribbean also with regards to my film.
Can they offer you any assistance in terms of finance or distribution, since this is a film that paints them in a very balanced light? Have they offered you any assistance in trying to get the word out? Okay.
No, not at all. Not at all. You know, and also that really wouldn't you know, the West will try and jump on anything to discredit a film that is exposes distortion. So, you know, we didn't want any assistance or funding from like those guys down there, because then they would say, oh, you've been funded by the regime and it's a propaganda piece. The independence of this film was key. And if any assistance or any distributors out there want to come on board, it should come from the diaspora or from someone, say, outside Zimbabwe, because you just don't want, you know how it is. They will try and jump on anything to discredit the film. But if there's somebody in Zimbabwe that says to me, a businessman, go, look, I understand your struggle and what you're doing is a service for Africa, a service for Zimbabwe, we would like to assist you, I'll look at it. Of course I'll look at it. But it's been a struggle, Brother Ron. You know what I mean? It's an independent film. It's a real struggle. But, you know, our brothers before us, our leaders before, struggled much more than we're struggling now. You know, it's only a minute thing that I can do to contribute to our continent.
I mean, like, you're very humble about the whole thing, but, I mean, you did an extraordinary piece of work, because, I mean, people talk about doing stuff. You actually did it, and you committed, like, your blood, sweat, tears, and your years to making this happen. You grind and, you know, did all the things you had to do. So they should definitely be commended, but does it trouble you that, you know, so many people say they, you know, enjoy this film or they think it's an excellent film, but yet you can't seem to get people aboard to help distribute this film? Or, I mean, what can people do? What can an everyday person do? Like, some people say, well, it sounds like a great idea, or if they saw the movie, they thought it was fantastic. What can they do to help you get the word out about this fantastic film? What can be done with things that everyday folks can do?
In terms of everyday folks, we're talking about a multimedia world nowadays. It's social media. And that's the most powerful thing that's out there. It's about spreading that message. It's about connecting everybody and saying, you've got to see this film. Okay? In time, we'll get it on video on demand and DVD. You know, they just need to stay, you know, keep tuned on our website, and we'll keep them posted. But it's about saying, you've got to watch this film, because this film is really, really important. Because someone said to me in L.A. recently, unless Africa is free, then African Americans will never be free. And that's really, really important. And so it's key that people just zone in, tune in, and say, let's spread the word. And if that's how we can help this brother, let the communities get together on the social media and get the message out there.
Yeah, I thought, I mean, while hearing you talk, when I saw that film, because it was so powerful, man, because it was like a long day we had, you know, the initial meeting day. So people introduced themselves and whatnot, but that film woke me up. It stirred something in me. It made me thankful for being in that room just to see that film, you know, a 2-hour film. But, you know, I was thinking about with the passing of Hugo Chavez, I can kind of see, like, some of the parallels between him and President Robert Mugabe. I know it's one thing that anytime guys like that do work for the people, they do things on behalf of the empowerment of the people, the thing that the West throw out is, well, you look at the hyperinflation. Look at their economy. It sucks. But what they don't talk about, the other half, is that when you don't compromise with the Western powers that be, they would tend to undermine, you know, your economy. And blackball, that's what it seems like to me, you know, like the Confessions of an Economic Hitman or whatever. But what's your take on that?
Well, you got to look at how Mugabe was viewed after independence of Zimbabwe. Here's a guy, the darling of the West, Nobel Peace Prize nominee, nominated by the Queen of England in 1994. And then just a few years later, he was perceived as a dictator. And the reason for that was because he took land from white farmers, very, very, you know, we're talking about less than 1% of the population had owned 80% of the most productive land. And he took land from them and redistributed it to the black majority. Now, that was it. That's how it turned, and that's when he became a dictator. And that's when George W. Bush and Tony Blair initiated the sanctions on Zimbabwe and decided, you know what, we're going to strangle this country in the hope that maybe the country will uprise and overthrow Mugabe. But the greatest weapon that I feel that Mugabe gave his people was education. Because a lot of them did realize that, well, hold on a minute, you were the darling of the West, but as soon as you took land from the whites, you're now the evil demon. And so it's like, no, we understand the struggles that we're going through. It's because you've taken land from the whites and given it to us. And we understand that you're trying to put us in a position where we can control our resources. And that doesn't act or fare favorably in the West. And Zimbabwe have suffered a lot because they've gone against that grain. But they've come through that now, Brother Ron. You know, there's been reports done by professors in the UK to say the Zimbabwean land reform has been a success. You know, so that's thrown egg in the faces of the West, who are now easing up on their rhetoric. Even the New York Times and other publications and some parts of the Western media and governments are now wanting to really engage because they know President Mugabe's land reform policy was absolutely right and is now proven to be a success. The blacks are wholly empowered in Zimbabwe right now. When I travel around Zimbabwe, it's just an empowering feeling, Brother Ron, to hear people say, I'm going to my farm. You know, you can see it in their heart, in their eyes. They're just so proud to say, I'm going to my farm and I'm going to farm. And that, for me, is wholly empowering.
I mean, you know, when you talk about that, it brings a lot of pride to me. You know, I feel a connection to that. I mean, it's something about, you know, it's being self-determined. It's so inspiring and empowering. But, like, when you say all that, I keep on thinking to myself, you think about, you know, you said Robert Mugabe was a darling at first until he started, you know, taking land from the white folks and giving it back to the African, to the original people of the land. When it was, Zimbabwe was known as the breadbasket of Africa, correct?
That's right.
So anywhere where there's resources, you know, the European powers that be will try to exploit it and control it. But also I'm thinking about, did Nelson Mandela mess up? You know, should Nelson Mandela did what Robert Mugabe did when he got out of prison? Or you think it was a different situation?
It's a different situation, but you know what was a real eye-opener for me was being in Southern Africa and hearing another side to Nelson Mandela that I'd never heard before. He's a hero of mine, and I'd never heard any bad words spoken about Nelson Mandela until I went to Southern Africa. And because in the West, we see, well, here's a man that was in prison for 27 years and came out to be president. Whereas when you go down to some of the liberation states, they're like, well, we've all been in prison, yeah, and we've all come out and we're in power too. But it's all about what you do for your people. How do you empower your people? Have you given them the means of production or broaden the scope for ownership? And a lot of people say Nelson Mandela did a lot but didn't do enough. And that for me was a real eye opener. And there was a lot of criticism in that fact. A lot of people say Mugabe has done a hell of a lot more. But then you look at it, but obviously President Mugabe's been in power for a lot longer. So South Africa at the moment, a lot of people say it's a ticking time bomb with regards to the issue of land and the issue of indigenization. Because, you know, you have, 40-plus million blacks there who look over the Limpopo River and see the Zimbabweans and think, well, these guys are empowered over there now. They've got their land, and they're doing really, really well. We want the same over here. And so, come on, President Zuma, come on, ANC. You know, let's get a move on. It's taking too long. We're still in the gutters. We're still living in shacks. You know, we don't feel empowered at all. And so, although Mandela did a great thing, there's always two sides to the story. You know, there's a section in my film where somebody criticizes Mandela, who feels that his heroism has been bequeathed or given to him by the whites in Europe. And, you know, when you're in the cinema, people are like, ooh, you know, people, that's harsh. But you're always hearing different sides of the story, and I thought that was important to put in the film.
That was fun. I think you did a great job of showing that other side, and I think people need to see the film because I walked away with a different perception of Mandela after seeing your film as well, too. It gave me a lot of food for thought to consider. But also I'm thinking about, you know, this perception of Africa, how women are treated, because you hear these tales, you know, well, not tales, but people talking about, you know, a lot of rape going on in Africa, how women are not given equal rights or full rights as men. I think about what's going on in the United States right now, you know, women still fighting for equal pay, or women getting a chance now to serve on the front lines of the military, and some other things going on. But what is your take on all of that? I mean, how people view how women are treated in Africa overall?
Certainly, I can speak, say, for example, of say in Ghana, where I'm from, or specifically Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe has a huge women's league, and I always say they absolutely run the homes in Zimbabwe. You have a vice president who is a woman. 30% of the resettled farmers are women. who were giving land. And also they had something that was introduced to law where women's name were put on the deeds as well as the men. And so with regards to Zimbabwe, equal rights for women has been there for years. In fact, the first hero of Zimbabwe, it goes as far back as the 1890s when the settlers came over. It was a female spirit medium who led the first uprise against the white settlers, Mbuyanianda. Now, she is the heroine of Zimbabwe, so with regards specifically to Zimbabwe, they've had equal rights for years, and obviously there are other places in Africa that might be a little bit different, but Zimbabwe, no, that's something that's really high up on the agenda that they've respected for donkey's years.
I also like actually, to begin it there, because one hot topic I've been looking into, coming from the meeting in Atlanta, in Ladonia, Georgia, is the issue of homosexuality as it relates to African diasporas. Because some people felt like certain people at the meeting were pushing the homosexual agenda, and that African nations were suffering because they refused to accept the homosexual agenda as dictated by Western powers. And what is the Zimbabwe stance, on homosexuality in that country?
I think in the new constitution, a referendum which they passed recently, they're against same-sex marriage. They're a Christian Catholic nation, so they're totally against that. And I know Mugabe gets criticised in the West a lot for his views. And I say to people, look, Robert Mugabe was born in 1924. You know, look at you can understand where he's coming from his view, how he grew up and how he sees things as a Catholic. So the views down in Zimbabwe is shown by the Constitution, and they're against the same-sex marriage, the debate that's kind of hitting America right now. But you do hear a lot of African presidents say, when they speak to Western leaders, the first things that they say is, oh, you've got to sort out your issue of homosexuality. Yet we haven't even sorted it out in our own backyard in America and the UK. But yet they're pushing it on African nations. And so this interference, this interference is, from what I hear from African leaders, is unwarranted. Let African nations do what they have to do, and let Western nations do what they have to do, as they're debating in the Supreme Court at the moment. And so this, if you like, pressure on African nations is really this interference. I don't think it really goes down well with a lot of people in Africa. But at the same time, you get these NGOs that are pushing a certain agenda on the ground for equal opportunities in Africa. I mean, and that's always going to happen.
That's very true. I just think there was interest because I know, like I said, it's very hot. I heard some things I wasn't sure. So you're saying that this push of homosexuality is very real as it relates to Africa, the Western world. I can't remember which president said it. He said every time he gets on the phone to a Western leader, that's what they push. What about equal rights? What about homosexuality? And a lot of them are kind of fed up with hearing it because of the traditional and cultural implications. And so every country to their own. You can't, over in the West, say you must allow this in your country or else. Every country has a right to decide what they want to do. And in the Zimbabwean constitution, they're certainly against that notion of same-sex marriage. Well, actually, too, it's kind of connected to that in a way. Is there a tradition of any, homosexuality in African culture at all that you can recall from your research? Is there anywhere in Africa where they acknowledge that there's a homosexuality in their culture?
No, not that I know of, and I haven't done any research in that at all. Again, I watched a TV program recently, and some white guy said that, before Africa was colonized, there was a culture of that. But I don't know about that, that I will look up. But no, I haven't done extensive research into that at all. But, just as a layman traveling around Africa, there's not a culture of that at all. You look at South Africa, yes, there is a culture. I think, in fact, you're allowed to have same-sex marriage in South Africa. You watch a lot of the soap operas, and it's very, very open in South Africa. But certainly in a lot of the other countries that I've been to and traveled to, no, I never saw much of it. I know there's a documentary that I saw in Uganda, and they were really pushing for equal rights for homosexuals, and there's a number of documentaries that are pushing that in Africa, but they're made by Western filmmakers.
With a certain type of agenda, right? Probably well funded by the powers that be too, as well. Which makes what you've done so amazing. Against all odds, you manifested. It shows the power to me of black genius. I mean, you can take something and make something out of nothing. I mean, like I always tell people, in America, we take broken instruments and made jazz, but they cut music education out the schools. We made hip hop. So black folks, we are some powerful people when we want to be. And you know what the Western world calls manifest destiny, we call self-determination of diaspora. So I applaud those men and women, brothers and sisters, for taking control of their own destiny, because your self-image, like Oscar Machado said so many years ago, your self-image is your destiny. That's your destiny. So I think it's important that people take, responsibility and accountability for that. But getting back to your movie, it's like when you look at movies like that, what makes your movie great is like, we already know that we're going to be talking about a certain subject matter, which is Robert Mugabe. But also, you kind of have a power to create, stars. Like, the reason I'm talking about you creating stars and stuff, it's kind of like I'm looking at your friend Gary, the guy that helped you make the film, who's a native of Zimbabwe. And I just want to talk to him. What was Gary's agenda in this whole film and project?
Gary Kai Mushamba-Dorpe was based in the UK and a former banker, and I met him in London, and he was kind of appalled by how his country was being perceived in the media, and every time he'd go back home, it was like, well, it's not like that. So he introduced me to his country way back in 2007, and, he wasn't a filmmaker, he wasn't a journalist, he was just, he's a banker who was looking to get into the media. And so his agenda was just to show the accurate portrayal of the president and his country. And it was an interesting journey, actually, because we both were going through these ups and downs. And I think if you remember, there's a scene in the film where I say to him, look, we're right near the president. It's taken 9 months to get this close to the president. Just ask him yourself for an interview. We can't rely on the people around him. Do it yourself. And he froze. He really froze because he was sat in his president, next to his president, and he just couldn't open his mouth. I think that's what's the engaging aspect of this film. It kind of shows that journey of how we try to maneuver and get to the president, as well as telling the history, and as well as showing how this West are trying to penetrate through this kind of regime change agenda, if you like. So that kind of multi-layered film that I feel works really well and makes it accessible for a lot of people, especially the young people, which I was kind of trying to aim at.
Oh, man, yeah, I think, like I said, people need to see this film for themselves. Mugabe, Villain or Hero, this is a very important work. I mean, it's one of the most important things done on black people in the last 20, 30 years, actually. I mean, we always talk about, movies like Django Unchained and Color Purple and Precious, but this is actually like a movie about a real person and his achievements and his, high points and low points and whatnot, but you get to make up your own mind because it's such a balanced take on the man and his legacy and his country. And also, like, you was on Gaddafi's airplane, looking at the film, it was a pretty nice ride. Were you able to talk to or meet Colonel Gaddafi?
No, I never got to speak to Colonel Gaddafi. President Robert Mugabe, people always think, oh, he's a lavish guy and he lives in a big house, and he's the opposite. He doesn't even have his own private jet. You know what I mean? We would ride on Air Zimbabwe, and when we got to Libya, it was Gaddafi saying, oh, Your Excellency, I must, give you a ride on my plane back home to Zimbabwe. And it was a really, really nice ride. But what was surprising, even, the president walked around the plane and thinking, oh, wow, this is a really nice plane. He hadn't done that much of them. No, that was a really, really nice gesture. I think the time that we were in Libya in 2009, it was a conference to discuss the United States of Africa. Something we've been, Africa's been discussing since the OAU 50 plus years. 50 years ago this year. Next month, in fact. Yeah, in May. And so that's why we were in Libya. to discuss this really, really important issue, and Gaddafi was hosting the conference, and that's how I ended up on his plane, which was really, really interesting. It's a very nice plane indeed.
Were you surprised what happened, like, I guess a couple of years later after that conference with Gaddafi? Did it kind of shock you?
Oh, absolutely. I think it shocked a lot of people, but in saying that, you have some people say, why should you be shocked at all? Because here's obviously a man who, again, has the two sides to the story with Gaddafi as well. But here's a man that's invested in a lot in Africa for the betterment of Africans, and he had a lot of strong ideas which the West didn't like, and he had oil, and he had a lot of control. And so, they brought him down. It's as simple as that. So, yes, I was surprised. But, why should we be surprised, really? If you have a man that stands up to the might, sometime or another, they're going to try and bring you down.
Well, that what makes Mugabe's story so much more extraordinary to me, the fact that he could survive the way he has, transitioning to different roles, whether it be a political prisoner or a freedom fighter, president to some people, dictator to some people. But it's amazing to know that he's able to survive, not only survive, but also thrive under certain circumstances that other people would have, fallen by the wayside many years ago.
Yes.
So what is the quality? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. You asked the question, Brother Ron. I do apologize.
No, I was asking, what was the most surprising trait you found out about, Robert Mugabe? Like, what was something that was like, wow, I didn't know he was this type of person, or made you think, twice about the man himself?
He's an absolute intellectual. 6 degrees, 2 master's degrees, former school teacher, very, 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 very eloquent. The humor is unbelievable. He's a very, very funny man. And he's been there, done it. He's been through several U.S. presidents and British prime ministers, so he knows the terrain. He knows how global politics works. And so how has he been able to withstand it? Because if you look at certainly recent history, his policies have been right. So it's hard for the West to really get rid of him, because his policies are based on trying to empower Africans. Now, for so many years, the West is saying, we need to help Africans with this aid. And Mugabe is saying, forget your aid. If you want to help us, come and help build factories. Stop just giving us some needles and some medicines to feed our children. Come with development for manufacturing countries. And so you can't disagree with that. You can't disagree with that. And he's saying to his people and others around Africa, let's take control of our resources. They want to come and do a deal with us. 51% ownership should belong to the local indigenous people. Whereas other countries, their budgets are made up of 80% of aid. So they can't stand up and say, get lost to the West like Mugabe can. As he says in the film, the fellow African leaders, they support him, but quietly. Because if they do stand up, some of their aid might be removed. So what I saw in President was the strength of the man. Do you see what I mean? Right. He's just a real kind of, I don't know, there's not many like him, as people like to say. He's cut from the same cloth as Kwame Nkrumah. And they're really across Africa, there's no leaders like him, because he's really fought real struggles, the real struggles to gain independence, through the barrel of a gun. And so he's willing to stand up and fight for the right that he believes in. Yes, you'll get people that criticize him in Zimbabwe. Yes, you're going to get people that criticize his implementation methods around the world. You get that. But no one's perfect, But the ideals, I always get with the ideals. The ideals are right. But sometimes the implementations might be a bit wayward. But certainly the ideals of African for Africans, that we should own our land and resources, is absolutely right. You just need the right people around you to implement it correctly. And over the years, people have criticized the way things have been implemented, but not really criticized the ideals.
But that's fair crap, man. Like, when you said all that, man, so many things race to my mind, because one thing I think about is the Batman complex, where if you live long enough, you know, the hero becomes the villain. I mean, I think that's with Castro. I mean, I think Che Guevara died at the right age, because now he's a martyr. You know, you kind of, some of his imperfections, you become perfect in death, especially if you die young and idealistic, whatever. And the Western powers can manipulate your image like it did with Che. You look at somebody like Castro, who survived the Cold War and, you know, mafia hits and so many presidents of the United States and all these embargoes, he still stands. And if you will wonder, like, will come in the Nkrumah, he's from that same cloth, if more leaders had that type of backbone. Because it's something about black unity. You know what I'm saying? Like we talking about police brutality in the States and around the world even, when it concerns, concerns people of color. If we actually had some real black unity, a lot of stuff that we talk about would cease to exist. It would become obsolete. You know, for example, like I ask people all day long, I said, you ever heard of a black cop in America killing a white kid and getting away with it? Mm-hmm. But you hear about white cops killing black kids all day long, get suspended with pay, and get to keep their job after the quote-unquote investigation. So what I'm saying is, if more of these leaders had a spine, like Mugabe, because Mugabe, he only going to die once, but these leaders, it seems like they die every day, 1,000 deaths.
Yeah.
So I think that's unfortunate. But I don't know, man. Like, people need to see your film. That's all I got to say. I mean, there's so much you raised in that film. And I think all great art starts conversation. They're conversational pieces. And it's like what you're talking about needs to be had, this discussion. Because
I think that's it's key. It's key for the young, because we're just so used to watching what's been fed to us. Yeah, and can you imagine if I'd never embarked on this project? To be honest, I might have gone to my grave thinking, well, you know what, I believe what the Western media told me about Mugabe, and that's that.
Right.
So I feel that I have contributed in a way to history, and that's why, although it's been a huge sacrifice financially, really contributing to history as the greats have done. You know what I mean? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with this extremely small sacrifice, because I do feel like I've contributed a little bit to history, because a lot of young people, in the NYU recently, have said thank you very much. You know, it was so empowering to watch this film, and because these are the future leaders of Africa and the world, and so they have more of an idea of how that kind of geopolitics kind of work, and especially when you want to fight for the rights of your people, that you're gonna be up against the battle, and so people just like the way Mugabe has the strength and the power to kind of fight against that, and the response has been great. It really, really has. It's been phenomenal, and I just hope that I can get it out to as many people as possible, Brother Ron. And that's why it's great coming on the radio and being able to push this film as I'm doing now, because that's what it's about. Because you could go down the traditional distribution route, and somebody may take your film and say, great, 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 here you go, and they put it on a shelf, or they limit the showings, or they show it for 1 week, and they're in control of it. I can't afford to do that from a point of view of history. I don't want to go that route. It's like somebody said to me in Selma, Alabama recently, if I wanted to get a clip of Dr. Martin Luther King, they'll have to go to the establishment and pay X amount of money to use a clip of Dr. Luther King. I don't want that to happen with this film, because then somebody else is in control of it. And so by me getting on your radio, by me traveling across America and just showing this film wherever, it's really, really important. You can't suppress information nowadays. And so this film will get out, man. There's no question about that.
If people actually go to your website and set up a screening, like you looking for people, I mean, are you open to people helping you get screenings in certain cities around the country or with certain organizations?
Absolutely. People want to invite me to come down and do a screening. I'll do a Q&A. I'll bring my executive producer down, and we'll have a discussions about it, as I've done and as I'm doing now. I go to Oakland tomorrow, in fact, where the Oakland International Film Festival, the film opens that festival there. It screens twice. Then I go to L.A. To screen at the Black Association of Documentary Filmmakers. And, you know, I'm prepared to do that. I'm prepared to go anywhere. I'm one of those kind of filmmakers who's like, yeah, I'm not going to do this or going to do that.
Right.
I'll turn up and I'll talk, and you know, people can ask me whatever they want to ask me about the film.
Okay, well, speaking of that, I'm going to open up the phone lines. We have people on here patiently waiting. I don't know if they want to just listen or they have something to say, but I'll open up and see what they got to say. And feel free to call in, area code 646-652-4593. That's area code 646-652-4593. And, of course, today's topic is the truth about Mugabe, villain or hero. We got Brother Roy, who's the filmmaker extraordinaire and visionary behind the powerful documentary, Mugabe, Villain or Hero. So we're going to go to the phone line. Without further ado, area code 858, you on the air. Welcome to We All Be. Everything to say to our guests. 858. Going once. 858. 401. Okay. They're just listening. Okay, we'll go. Sister Kelly, are you there? You want to say anything? I guess you're just listening. So we got people that's listening in. We got some activity in the chat room. People talking about somebody said Mugabe professes peace for the people from our understanding. I guess that sounds like that what he does, but sometimes, you know, in order to get peace, to keep the peace, you got to pick up the gun, correct, Brother Roy?
Hello?
Brother Roy, I said sometimes when you got to, you know, when you're trying to keep peace, you got to pick up the gun, correct?
Oh, well, I mean, you know, it depends where you're coming from, because, you know, if you look at the liberation of Zimbabwe, they have to pick up a gun because that white supremacist regime weren't going to give it up. And so Robert Mugabe and ZANU and ZAPU had to pick up a gun to get rid of them. Yes, and that kept the peace.
Okay, cool. Well, we got a call. I think I know who this is. Sister Chandra Williams, you on the air? You want to say anything? Welcome to We All Be.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, go ahead. You're on the air with Brother Roy.
Oh, good afternoon. Thank you both for doing this show, and thank you for the film you're making. I think this is one of the most important things us to understand how media misrepresents the world to us, and the more we take charge of making our own representations of what's going on, the more we can return to a sort of a state of being that we won. I mean, I think so much of the world, what's going on in the world right now, is created through the impressions we get.
Sister Chandra? Hello. I guess we lost her. I guess she'll call back in. Brother, what do you think about what she just said?
Yeah. Oh,
that's like that's your mission.
Yeah, she's absolutely right. Because the wrong impressions give regular folk at home the wrong impressions about, say, Africa. And so what does that mean? You know, they have this kind of thing we have in the UK where it's like, you know, they have this thing where they say we need to give to the poor in Africa and, you know, give a dollar, give a dollar, give a dollar. But we need to actually get people to listen to what Africans want. Yes, thank you for your aid. We appreciate that, is what they say back on the continent. But let's have more of a partnership whereby how many years have you been giving us $1 or £1 or €1? Let's now look at it and think, how can we re-engage? Let's look at kind of, I think I said earlier, let's look at partnerships where we can help the economies to grow and help for the betterment of life of Africans through manufacturing, through building factories, not just giving $1 here or $1 there. And so people just have this kind of perception in the Western world that Africa and Africans are beggars. Mm-hmm. And unless we tell the stories, uplifting stories, we need to tell more uplifting stories for people then to say, well, actually, we can actually engage with Africa on a different level as equals. Not that we're going to Africa and we're just going to give them handouts. That's not what the Africans that I meet want. Handouts, you know.
Okay, we got another call. I think we got Sister Chandra coming back in. But we also got another caller. Undisclosed number. Are you there? You want to say anything? Private number?
No, I'm just listening.
Thanks for listening. Okay. So you got people out here. You got their attention, man. People, I'm going to Sister.
That's great.
Sister Chandra, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you for that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I know you got cut off. Your phone dropped or something. So and you finished your thought.
Oh, yeah, and I got in, and he might have been answering what I was asking. I was just asking how can we make it known to common people, the manipulation that goes on through media, but I was interested in what he just said, and what you just said, Roy, about perceptions of Africa. And I think, in addition, there are things that we in America need that are more prevalent in African culture than in American culture. And for me, it seems like that's part of the misperception, to make it look like Africa needs us and we don't need Africa. When in fact, of course, in terms of resources, natural resources, we're constantly taking from Africa. And then also culturally, there are a lot of things that happen, wisdom in Africa, healing, community in Africa, that in all of the different cultures throughout Africa that we desperately need in America. And so, and even media power. I was thinking of, I guess, the Fulani community in America from Senegal and West Africa. They have satellite TV here in America where they are watching stations from home and whatnot. And I wonder, can we create networks with non-Western countries to create media outlets in America that tell more truthful stories?
That's a good point. Oh, Brother Roy, you want to answer that?
No, absolutely. But, it's about funding. How can we have an African CNN? There are a couple of stations that are out there that are growing, that have that kind of, or trying to get that independence. I think it's Arise TV have now got a new news channel, which was really, really good to see. But how do you have your own African CNN, if you like, or African Sky or CBS? That's a great, and be completely independent, because you could have one, but it could be owned by the very might of the people that you're fighting against. So how do we go about having that kind of, if you like, channel organization? And I think it comes back to African leaders. I want African leaders to see this film and think, well, hold on a minute, we need to now invest in the visual arts. We need now to invest in this whole media domain, because the media has been used against us for so many years. Why can't we then use it to tell our own stories? And I think that's the mentality, which is hard. Don't get me wrong. I'm in Africa and I discuss this. And sometimes they find it hard to fathom, because they are, but it's a viable business. But it's not about being a viable business. It's about transforming perceptions around the world, which then turns into a viable business. And I think it's just really, really important that entrepreneurs, the private sector, and African governments start to realize the power of us telling our own stories in a way that we tell the stories in a professional way. It's not about telling the stories using your flip phone. It's about telling the stories in a professional way so that folks around the world can digest the information that you're giving them. And so we need a pool of funds that we can dip into and tell our own stories in Africa, because there's money in Africa. Let's not get it twisted. There is a whole load of resources in Africa for people to get on board and do this. But I guess they need some examples to see how it works. And I think the film that I've made, looking at, if you like, the most vilified African leader, if you could say, of all time, right. and able to create a balanced view, a less distorted view, in a successful way, hopefully that will open the minds up of many different African leaders.
Right.
Yeah.
It made me think, and that's the last thing I'll say, what you just said made me think of Youssou N'Dour, the great world musician, who is, if I understand, I know he owns a television station network in Senegal, and I believe right now he's the minister of tourism with the contemporary government, the current government in Senegal. And I think of a person like him, who's been a world leader and a person leader in terms of humanities, and I wonder where he would fall into this type of thought pattern or idea about creating better perceptions. Just a thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to going to Senegal, and I'll be knocking on his door. Absolutely.
That's great. That's great. Well, for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you, sister. I appreciate you calling in. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah.
I want to ask you this, too, Brother Roy. Knowing that, what you went through all this with the process, like we said, we made plans and God laughs at our plans. Would you ever do something like this again? Is this something that you feel like you would do again?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I'm looking to go to Zimbabwe and say to the president, can I have a part 2? But this time with a part 2, don't make me wait 3 years to do this. I think we cannot stop telling our own stories. We've got to continuously be able to pose questions to these leaders that who I don't want to die with history. You see what I mean? Because I'm getting all these people reaching out from around the world saying, "Oh, I didn't know this. I didn't know that."
Right.
And I'm like, President Mugabe's been around for a very, very long time, and we didn't even know this. So we need more of these leaders on the ground. We need to get more information from them. We don't want them dying with their history, because that's what the system wants. They die with their history, then we don't know much. And so, yes, I will do this again, and I will do it again, especially when it comes to the issue of protecting our land in Africa, because that's the bigger issue right now. And that's one of the projects I'm researching at the moment. People criticize, or the West criticize Mugabe for taking land from whites and giving it to blacks, but they don't highlight the issue with land grabbing at the moment, where you have countries, entrepreneurs, going to Africa, buying up or leasing thousands of hectares of land, wiping out communities, bringing in mechanized equipment, polluting the air, destroying the soil, and taking the food out to their countries to feed their own people. People are not focusing on that. That's what we need to focus on. Those are the kind of stories we ought to tell. Yet the West want to focus on Mugabe for taking land from whites and giving it to the blacks, yet these corporations are just buying up a whole load of land across Africa. Let's highlight those stories as well. So I want to keep going. And that's why it's great traveling around America, because you want to meet like-minded people that say, yeah, you know what, Roy? I help you with that. I'd invest in that. Let's move forward together on it.
That sounds beautiful, man. When you just said all that, I was just thinking about, people found out, there's pirates in Somalia. But the real story is, why did they become pirates in the first place? And you were talking about the pollution, the ecosystem, and they were fishermen before they were pirates. Yeah. And, you got the European powers and other people dumping into the ecosystem, and you got no government to address your grievances to. Sometimes you got to take things into your own hands. But that's another story in itself. It's more complex than what I'm presenting. But just to get an idea of what you're talking about, when people villainize somebody like Mugabe based on one source, of information. So, I think it's very important what you're doing, that we do create a platform and find a way to get this information out there, to disseminate, to educate. So I want to get one more caller in here. I think they want to talk. From the ATL, area code 404. You on the air? Want to say anything? I guess?
No, I'm just listening in, enjoying what I'm hearing.
Thank you, sir, for listening. God bless.
No problem.
So I know, brother, you got another interview coming up, correct? You got an interview with somebody with London, a radio show?
Yeah, I've got an interview at London radio show, but I've just got them on hold, brother. While I'm with your people, I don't want to interrupt or cut out, so we can keep going for a few minutes. If people are calling in, I don't mind that at all.
All right, cool, great, man. I was just being conscious of the time, because I know you're a good brother. You're very patient, brother, because it took you 3 years to do something you're not going to take 3 months. So you're very patient, brother. I ain't want to take advantage of that. But, the thing about it is that are you surprised of the people who are helping you with this movie? Has it surprised you the source of help that you got from this movie besides your good friend Neville? Has anybody surprised you with their help and support of this movie? Any organization?
There's been a number of people. I have to give a lot of love to a journalist out in D.C. called Obi Egbuna, who's really he works for one of the Zimbabwean newspapers, the Herald, out he's based in D.C. but writes for them in Zimbabwe, and he's really connecting me with a lot of different groups and organizations around the country, including colleges. But what's really, really been magnificent is people have been writing about this for years, but now they have a visual product that they can jump on and say, we told you so. You can actually see it for yourself. It's sometimes different when you're reading something to when you actually see it. And so people are like, wow, I can actually see Mugabe and how he interacts with his people, and I can see and make up my own mind what this guy's like. You can just get an idea of his mannerisms and all that kind of different flavor, which you don't get to see in the Western media. You kind of get to see an angry brother. And he's not that. When you're around the man, he's got this charm. He's a charming, humorous man. And it's really, really fascinating to see. And so when I did a screening in Harlem the other day, you know, a lot of old folk in there, and they really do know the history, but they still came away thinking, wow, I didn't really know that. You know, the way he interacts or the way he conveys his messages, when you see it from a visual aspect, is very, very different. It just enhances what they've been saying and writing about for years. But no, there's been a lot of people from all over the country that have been reaching out, Brother Ron, and wanting to push the message out because they feel that it is so important for us in the diaspora to understand what's happening on the continent, especially with Zimbabwe. It's really one strategically the most important country, I feel, with regards to how an independent African country should go, the direction it should go in terms of trying to take control of their resources. Yes, there's a lot of debate on how they should do it, how they should implement it, but at least they're debating. And because, you know, you can look at other African countries that produce oil and gold, but they're not really in control of that. Whereas Zimbabweans are going down a road where they're really trying to take control of that. You'll always get people debating and saying, yeah, but the elite get the best, or the elite are raping the country. But with Zimbabwe, especially with the land, that was only 5% of the elite that are taking the farms. Well, let's focus on the 95% of the people that are actually farming. And so, you know, the media might want to take you down one road, saying, oh, no, the land's gone to the elite. No, let's break it down. Yeah, that's not the case. 5% have got the elite have got the land, but 95% of the people, regular people, are actually farming. And so we need to focus more on the successes of Africa rather than the negatives, which we've been seeing for the last 50, 60 years.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you say, he has a great sense of humor, and that came across very well. He was very candid. He was a very witty and sharp, person. He has a sharp wit and he has a sharp mind. It reminds me, like, when I talk to people that knew Malcolm X, that, relatives of his and his closest comrades, they always say, well, one thing about Malcolm, he was shy. He was, very shy, but he had a great sense of humor. Because it came across in the way he spoke to people. You look at a lot of Malcolm X speeches. I mean, he peppered little stories in there, and he just had a great comedic timing. It's something that even Dr. King didn't really have in his speeches. Malcolm made it more personalized, like he was really just talking to you, not talking to a group of people. But it's like that. He has a great, understanding of people. And but at the same time, like, how much is his fault that he can't find a successor or groom a successor, like an immediate successor? Because I look at, in American politics, especially when it comes to black leadership, a lot of them guys don't groom anybody. I mean, there's nobody to take their place. So how much is a generational thing where he came from a different era and had different responsibilities and whatnot versus him not being effective in grooming leadership?
I think you hit the nail on the head. He comes from a different era, and the era being, if he was appointed to be leader of ZANU. And so that era of comrades were like, well, if the people, the party, want you to lead, they will put you forward. Now, that's their philosophy. Now, the modern-day philosophy might disagree with that and say, well, you should have someone in place for when you leave or if you die in power, whatever it is. So, I'm of the view that, it's good to groom a successor, but in saying that, you do have to look at who's around him that can continue the revolution, who's strong enough to continue that revolution, who can stand up to the might of those who want us to remain low and poor. And so people say, well, I can understand, not that I can understand why he hasn't groomed a successor, but I can understand that there may not be one currently because of the fight that he's fighting. Not many people can fight that way,
right?
Really. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there are people waiting in the wings. I to this day, I don't know who's going to take over from the president. It will be interesting, but he's one of a kind in that sense, in that mold. I think once the Lord takes President Mugabe, that for me would be the last of the greats. Along with Mandela, of course. But it'll be. I think it's down to the youth now to continue the legacy of what he's now implementing, the ownership. Broadening the ownership of the resources. I think for me that's the key. That's the key legacy for me. That indigenization.
Oh wow! I mean, I was just thinking about it. Legacy is such a heavy word when you think about it. It seems like with Mugabe, what would be his legacy? And I think you made a lot of great points as it pertains to that, because I'm also concerned is this documentary you did, this passion that you have to document this man's presidency. Is this the only documentation of his achievement, or has he written an autobiography or anything outside of this documentary?
Well, I'm told when the president was going to retire in 2006, he said that he wanted to just write his memoirs, and I hope he is writing. I'm sure he would be writing. There's a lot of documentaries on President, but it's been done by the other side. It's been one way, and funny enough, a lot of these documentaries that have come out on the President, which have been negative, have all been shown a lot of love in these huge festivals. There was a film that actually got on the short list to be nominated for an Oscar, and it had Mugabe's name in the title, yet he wasn't even in the film, and it was such an anti-Mugabe film. Now, if I decided to be the first Western filmmaker to interview Mugabe, which I was, if I came back and produced an anti-Mugabe film, having been the first guy to interview him in a long time, then I'm sure I'll be standing up getting an Oscar, they'll be paying me millions of dollars, and they'll be calling me a hero. Because I haven't done that, maybe that's why they ain't getting enough love, or maybe they just don't like the film, or maybe they don't think it's good enough, or maybe they think it's too long, I don't know. But it's interesting that all the anti-Mugabe films have been getting some love from a lot of these mainstream festivals, or not one of them are looking at me at all. But that's expected, and I was prepared for that in kind of readjusting my strategy. So that won't stop me. The way I see it, Brother Ron, is the likes of Mugabe and Nkrumah, Sekatore, Nasser, they fought way, way greater struggles than what we're fighting. And so me trying to push this film out to different quarters is nothing, pales way in comparison to what the struggles the foundations they lay for us. We just need to continue it on. And be vigilant. That's the key. Be vigilant, because there's always people trying to knock you down. More your own people, to be honest, than the other side. So you always just got to be vigilant as to who present themselves before you, and that's really, really important.
But how do you not take that personal, like you said, the last part, your own people will try to knock you down? How do you still love your people? How do you still love and serve your people in spite of what they do to you? I mean, this is the perfect day to talk about that, of course, right? It is Easter's Resurrection Day, or whatever they want to call it. How do you keep going when your own people are being used as tools to undermine your mission?
To be honest with you, it comes down to information. Some people are just ill-informed. People are just unaware. They've been fed one thing or brainwashed. They've been brainwashed a certain way for so long that they're just not aware of what's actually happening in Africa or around them. And so you can and you can't really blame them. You just look at it and think, well, you know what? Just sit down and watch this for 2 hours, and then make up your own mind. And I've had audiences who've gone into the auditorium and thought this man is an evil black Hitler, and have come out and shook my hand and said, I completely changed my view of this man from what I've just seen. And that's what it's about. If you've got an open mind, just watch this film and then make your view. So it's very, very difficult sometimes to disagree with factual information backed up with archive footage and actuality on the ground, because nobody expected a black man to be on the ground capturing all this stuff that was going on between 2007 and 2010. And so that's taken a few people off guard. And so when they see the film, they're like, wow, okay, well, that's a little bit hard to disagree with, because he wasn't even afraid to criticize President Mugabe. He criticizes President Mugabe in the film, but he actually criticizes him when the West praise him. And so it catches quite a few people off guard, and I guess that's why some of the mainstream festivals find it hard to stomach. I think they're okay and happy with just the demonization of President Mugabe, but they'll come back round. You know, as their governments start to ease their rhetoric on Zimbabwe, the media will start to realize that, hold on a minute, what else is there to say about Zimbabwe and Mugabe? We've said everything that we can say. Yet the man is still standing, the land reform is working, and he has a great deal of support in Zimbabwe and across Africa. And the more us African Americans, Africans in the diaspora support the message of Africa for Africans, and then we can just kind of try as much as possible to take control of that image, that perception that people have of us.
Yeah, your self-image is your destiny, like Oscar Michaud said so many years ago. But also I'm thinking about this stuff, like you talking about the Oscars. I had a conversation with Brother Sam Gringley, who is the author of The Spook Who Sat by the Door, which is a classic novel and also a classic film. And he told me a couple of years ago, if he did get nominated for an Oscar and won it, that means he didn't do his job. Because I think about, you know what I mean? Think about the fact that you basically know why they want to select your movie, even though it's a phenomenal movie. I think about if you gave Mugabe the last King of Scotland treatment in documentary form, you won a couple Oscars. But you think about when black folks do win Oscars or get nominated for Oscars, it's always playing some degenerate role, it seems like. Or maybe like a subservient role, like a housemaid, which is not, it's a respectable job, but then it's like, we still win an Oscar for being a housemaid or a vamp or a mistress or a degenerate cop, but we can't win an Oscar for being strong, black, and proud.
Yes.
They won't allow that. And I commend you, brother, for keeping your backbone straight. So, you just keep on doing what you're doing, man, because you're definitely an inspiration. I will get one more call because maybe she can help get this down into the Delta, not the Atkins, but the Mississippi Delta. Sister Margaret Block, you on the air?
Hey, Ron.
Hey, it's a happy Resurrection Day.
Oh, okay.
Okay. How you doing? You got anything to say? We got Brother Roy. He's from London town. I mean, he's in the States right now, going to be in Oakland, your old stumping ground, the Bay Area, to show his film about Robert Mugabe, the President of Zimbabwe.
When?
There's a possibility. Tomorrow. He's going to be in Oakland.
Oh, my granddaughter go to school in Berkeley. I got to text her and tell her to go to it then. Oh,
great. And what actually is what can we do to bring this movie down to Delta State? I think the brothers and sisters down in Delta State need to see this movie. You think that's possible?
Excuse you, why you think I call it Delta State Plantation?
That's right. But you got anything, I guess, Brother Roy, about his film?
No, I had been hearing some negative stuff about Mugabe, and I was trying to figure out how did he change so drastically from what he was when he first took office. And I just couldn't figure out why he changed, if he changed, why he changed, and if it was really true.
Well, I know me and Brother Roy, we talked about this for the last hour, so I think mostly it's the media coverage that changed on him. Like Malcolm X said something, to paraphrase Malcolm, the media has the power to make your friends your enemies and your enemies your friends. It's all about perception and who's telling the story. So they got that type of power. But, even I remember when Hugo Chavez passed, I was fascinated that even some propaganda machine like the New York Times, with all due respect, and the Washington Post can actually have some positive things to say about Hugo Chavez. Why he couldn't say why he was alive? Why he couldn't inform people about some of the things he was doing for people, even in the United States? So I think the same thing probably would be Mugabe, like what Brother Roy, you said about, the economy, everything is slowly coming around. But he actually did the thing, like I keep on thinking to myself, if Nelson Mandela just did what Mugabe did, the people of South Africa, the black people of South Africa, would be better off for generations to come.
They sure would. Mm-hmm. They really would. I admired Mugabe because I'm going, how could he? I thought he had given the land back to the white folks or whatever. I haven't been really keeping up with it because, I don't live in the city anymore, and I live in the country, in the Delta, and you know how that is, trying to survive and trying to enlighten people. And you can't enlighten anybody if they don't want to be enlightened about Africa, because people still have a negative opinion about Africa. So, you know, I'm just, but I really did, I got to see your documentary. And I don't know about Delta State. And you know you can't even try it at Mississippi Valley State.
Well, these are places, like you said, people need to see it. They got that plantation mentality.
Yeah.
And, but like a lot of people, I mean, like people like, you know, I bet a lot of them brothers and sisters down there never even heard of Robert Mugabe. We see, like the thing about what puzzles my mind, I don't mean to interrupt, but puzzles my mind is the fact that Sister Margaret, you know, you being a civil rights veteran doing a lot of work for the people in the 60s, we have more technology now than y'all had back then.
Yeah,
y'all was better organized. Y'all was better able to communicate and get things out to the people. So, like, this is the thing with this movie. This documentary needs to be seen. And we got all this social media, but I don't think people got the mentality. How do you recalibrate people thinking or reboot people thinking? Because this is a very important film. This might be one of the most important films ever done about Africa, period. I would say that in Guadalupe and said it is, you know, because it tells the lion story. It doesn't tell the story of the hunter. Don't you agree, Brother Roy, that your film does that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well put, actually. Very well phrased.
I have no idea how you stored people to thinking. You said recalibrate their thinking. First, they gotta think from the.
Yes, ma'am.
They just don't think, and then we've been just romanticized and loved, and fooled and loved into a false sense of security because maybe some people are doing well and whatever, but that's a thing that I've been talking to my friend about. How do you get people to think about real issues and not the superficial stuff that they all thinking about? I want to know who can tell me how do you do that? Because they don't think about Africa.
Well, it's difficult. I think the mainstream media is so powerful. Even within Africa, when you go across Africa, you speak to a lot of the young people, and even the young people are looking towards the Western culture and wanting to have the latest Nike or the latest clothes. And you're like, well, look what you're standing on. Look at the value of the soil that you're standing on. You don't need to look to the West. Now the West are now looking towards Africa. Embrace what we have within Africa. We don't need to look to the West. That's a brainwashing mechanism for us to look that way while they come and sweep the stuff from underneath our feet. And so I think that's a challenge around the world, not just in the Western world, but even within Africa.
Yeah,
I definitely agree with that.
I do too.
I definitely. But how much do we play a part in it? Go ahead, Sister Margaret.
I was saying TV. I always wondered why my neighbor, when we got a TV, she used to always tell us we looking at a one-eyed monster. I didn't figure that out until I got grown, actually, and started looking at this stuff and how we indoctrinate people. You can tell somebody that you can sell them a blue bull and make them think that it's real on TV, and people they buy into all of this stuff. And the internet and all of that, we just being inundated with stuff, but not the right stuff. And that's the purpose of it, is to keep you from thinking. You're not supposed to be able to think now. You're supposed to do whatever is shown in the media and believe it.
Exactly.
No, Brother Roy, I think let's listen to Sister Margaret. What she's saying is that it seems like the media, the Western media, is all about working on people's fears. And what you're trying to show people that, hey, the world is not flat. Here's the truth. Here are the facts. And I trust you enough to make up your own mind about what you think about Brother Mugabe. But you're not giving them any type of scare tactics. I think most people do things out of fear rather than knowledge itself. And I think that the media does a good job of keeping folks away from knowledge itself. Like, for example, I think about Africa, and I think about Easter, and I think about black churches call themselves missionary churches. Or I think about the fact that folks say, I'm doing missionary work in Africa. And I'm telling myself, how the hell are you going to do something in Africa called missionary work when everything came out of Africa? All the religion came out of Africa. How the hell are you going to do missionary work in Africa? Because you brainwash the African. The thing is that, hey, like, for example, I saw a BBC special about Cleopatra. They found her sister bones in Turkey in a tomb. And then the white people said, you know what? They were really African. No, really? They were African. They were in Egypt and Africa. They were really African? They weren't. They were like Vivian Lee or Elizabeth Taylor? Really? So they had to admit that. They said they had African bloodline because of the shape of their head. And they even did a computer-generated, with the skull to show how her sister's face would have looked. Very African. Do you mean to tell me that Cannibal was African and Nimrod? I'm saying this is how brainwashed we are. To think that all we think is about Tarzan and the apes when we think of Africa or poverty.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's all we think about. Yeah. We think that Africa, the civilization didn't start in Africa. We think that everybody from that, well, my great-grandfather is from somewhere in Africa. He was a slave. But people think in terms of African being stupid and running through the bush with spears and eating monkeys and stuff. And how can you change that thought with people?
Well, as Brother Roy did, I know you say you would do another documentary, but I mean, you guys that got like a lot of background in media, especially as it relates to young people. You know how the media works. You got a lot of experience there. You ever thought about venturing in other ways besides documentaries? I know maybe like a drama. I mean, you have any ideas about that or thoughts about that?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of ideas in the pipeline when it comes to feature films. Certainly around Africa, but I think what's really important, is to be able to come up with ideas and products that is able to not only sell well to our own people in Africa, but also to the world. We're going to do stories about Africa and help change that perception. I think we need to make I believe anyway, you've got to make a product that embraces everybody, blacks and whites, because their perceptions need to change too. And as well as our own people. So it has to be in my view, a commercial entity that is able to change those views. Because if you watch Tarzan was a commercial entity that brainwashed our people too, as well as their own people. Right. So we need to have our own replica tools to do the same in an entertaining way. And so yes, I have a lot of ideas about that, but it always comes down to budgets. These things cost a lot of money to make feature films, and it costs even more money to distribute. And so it's about having strategic partnerships to help come together to make these products or projects a reality.
I mean, actually, this too. I'm thinking about distribution because I talked to some people that made an independent film in Memphis recently, and it's not like it's a great movie, but it all comes down to distribution factor, like getting a good deal. And from my understanding, that a lot of distributors want to take more than half ownership of your work or a lot of percentage of your work. Is that an issue with you giving up percentage of work of your intellectual property when you invest all this time and effort into? Is that an issue with distributors as well?
I think this is something my executive producer doesn't want to go down that road. He's not wanting, especially with a film like this. If you're talking about feature film, it might be a little bit different. Sometimes you might get into certain deals. But with a film which is so important to African history, you really don't want somebody else from the outside to come along and take control of it and do what they want with it. And so it's really important to maintain as much control of this product as possible. And that's why it's important to have strategic partnership, for somebody to come along and say, we understand the pain that you guys have gone through financially, and we're looking and willing to take on some of that burden so you can distribute this film however you want to distribute it, be it DVD, video on demand, or selected theatre run. With this particular film, I think that's an important way to go, to look at an alternative distribution methods.
And also I want to say, I think it's very important what you're saying, man, because, when I talk to really intelligent people, very visionary people, for most part, you're very inspiring. You give me a lot of hope, man. It makes me feel good to be living in the same age and time as you. Bro, you're very courageous. I don't think you know of yourself as being courageous, but you are very courageous. And I think about Henry Hampton, the guy who created Eyes on the Prize. He was an alumni of we went to the same college, not the same time. He graduated back in 1960. Washington University in St. Louis. and they held the Henry Hampton archives there, the guy who created Eyes on the Prize. And I had a chance to talk to one of his producers, Sam Poehler, who did a lot of work with Spike Lee, Four Little Girls, Malcolm X, things of that nature. And we had a discussion. We had a lunch discussion before I graduated from school. And I asked him what type of man was Henry Hampton. And he told me, he wasn't no film director. He wasn't this and that. But he knew how to bring people together. Because everybody that worked on that project was the folks that people looked over or didn't give a second look at. And now they're like the leaders of their field. They're like the top, the best of the best, won all these Peabodys, Emmys, whatever you can name it, Oscars, whatever. So, he took a chance on people. But also in the story of Eyes on the Prize, it took him 13 years to make that documentary series. 13 years, refinancing his house, being short on funds, not being able to pay vendors, things of that nature. That's a story that people don't really know about. But the crazy thing about it is that he was going around different news stations throughout the country, saving all this civil rights movement footage. You had actually news stations around the country throwing away our people's history, throwing away, the Birmingham stuff. All of this footage that we take for granted now. He actually literally had to go, him and his researchers, into the garbage bins and get all this footage out. But the crazy thing about it is I learned while visiting the archives that it had been a while since the Eyes on the Prize documentary was made available because the same footage they saved, somebody else owned. And they want to get paid royalties on it or a certain fee. I said, this guy pulled this stuff out the garbage bin, literally. Pulled all this footage, and now you got some folks that own it. They thought, it used to be trash, now somebody's treasure. So the series is made available now, but I want to let you know that, man, what you're talking about is not crazy, and I'm glad you did what you did.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
And thank you, Brother Roy.
Well, that's what I was thinking about, how they got ownership of Eyes on the Prize. What about the people that was in it?
Yeah, it's a good system, Margaret. You got it. What about that? What do you say about that? The intellectual property thing is interesting.
Well, they exploiting us once again.
Mm-hmm.
They threw it away. They didn't want to show it on the mainstream media. Time somebody got it and made a documentary out of it, and now it's special, and they want to make the money.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how they are. Just take the blues, for example.
That's right.
The blues trails, and they just exploiting that too. Because I know they didn't like the blues, probably still don't like it, but they see it's the new cash cow now.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with all of those documentaries. Like I'm in a couple of documentaries, and now that I was sitting down thinking about it, I'm going, why did I do that? I don't see nothing from it.
That's something to think about. Go ahead, Sister Margaret.
Yeah, no. I always think, and somebody called me from, where were they? Storyboard.
Okay, I think I heard of that. Are they in Memphis?
I don't even know what it is.
Okay.
Want me to be in that, and I'm going, no, I think I'm going to sit back now and watch what you're going to do with our history.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know, I'm going, why now they got the intellectual property to our history? The people, I know some people that's in Eyes on the Prize and living on food stamps now.
There's something to be said about that, because Brother Roy, when Sister Margaret was talking about the blues trail, that the state of Mississippi has a blues trail where they mark important sites where blues musicians were either born or played or whatever. Significant history points in blues. And so you think about a state like Mississippi, where, you got all this terrible civil rights history, all these human rights violations. Yet the same folks they victimized for years and generations, they're making money off these people's legacies. And some of the people who are the descendants of these people are not getting a red cent dime from these, or a penny, red 6 penny, from these ventures. Think about a state where the person who actually was involved in the killing of Emmett Till, the young white lady who identified him to her husband, she's still alive in Greenville, but the state want to make, they want to start a civil rights museum. You got all these cold case files are still open in Mississippi, but yet the state want to make millions of dollars off the history of the blood, sweat, tears of a people. without acknowledging the grievances. So I think it's kind of ironic. Also, the state of Mississippi, has almost 70% of the inmates in Mississippi in the prisons are black.
Right. How many percent? What percentage?
Go ahead.
I think it's about 79, 80%.
That's crazy though, Sister Mark. But they got the highest number of elected black officials in the country. I
told you about those black faces in high places. Now they. I don't know what to think of them. They just want to be seen and want to say they did that. But the Mississippi, don't let it fool you because we have more black elected officials than any other state in the nation. I don't see any progress, anything that they've done significantly to talk about or for anybody to realize anything from it. I bet you. Go ahead.
No, I'm going to just connect this to what, I was thinking about, political leadership or black political leadership. And we were talking about a black political leader, world leader, and Brother Mugabe, the second oldest head of state, correct, Brother Roy?
Yeah. Yes, indeed, you're absolutely right. I think the first one is the Israeli, is it Perez?
Okay. But at the same time, this is a black leader that actually did things for his people. He gave his people back the land. You fight revolutions over land and bread. You fight revolutions and war. But you think about what Sister Margaret said. We fought a revolution, her contemporaries fought a revolution, a social revolution in this country. But look how the tables have turned. Whereas they were fighting for empowerment, now the same folks that fought for the empowerment got disenfranchised. And now they, like you said, people that was in Ireland Prize Dock, some of them got on food stamps. Some of them got health care or savings. Whereas Brother Mugabe is a freedom fighter, came from that lineage. And he never forgot the lessons of what he learned on the battlefield, and he did the things necessary to secure his people for generations to come. And I think that's a when you think about black leadership in America versus black leadership abroad, there's the big difference.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is. That's the reason I was talking about exploiting our history now, and like Eyes on the Prize and a lot of other documentaries and stuff, is that same thing they want to do to Africa. If they can make some money. Now, if you could give them your documentary and they see where they make millions off of it, you wouldn't have a problem showing it nowhere. It'd be in all the main theaters and everywhere else in the country. But since you're not giving up the rights to it and they can't exploit it, then you might as well just show it in venues like you're showing it in. It's all about money.
I think there's many different ways to go about it nowadays, and we will get it to as many people. Video on demand is such a huge thing now. We can get millions of people tuning in to pay $5 or $10 to watch it online or on DVD. You can now hire certain theatres. I think it's about organisation, and you make a good point with regards to they used to mobilise better back then, way back then, Brother Ron, and they didn't even have social media. But I think there comes a time, or needs to come a time, where we were able to mobilise and have something productive to mobilise with regards to Africa anyway. And I'm hoping my film goes some way for people to say, as they're doing now, to say, okay, no, let's back this, let's push this to every single corner. And the mainstream will come on board. One thing you can be sure about with Robert Mugabe, the mainstream are totally aware of Robert Mugabe. It's not like he's not like an obscure figure that not everybody knows about. They know about it. So they'll jump on board once the momentum builds. Once we all start saying everybody needs to see this and the numbers start building, the mainstream will come back round, but then they will come to us. As you said, Brother Ron, this is a real person that we're dealing with here that they're all aware of. So once our community starts getting the message out, the mainstream will come back round to us. I'm sure about that, because they're just as fascinated with Mugabe as we are.
And especially if I'm gonna ask you this as a person on the sidelines, I guess, in terms of the election coming up for Zimbabwe. What do you think are the chances of Mugabe actually winning that election?
That was really interesting. There was a survey done by an American think tank who was down in Zimbabwe in December 2012, saying if there were an election to happen today, then ZANU-PF would win. Now, this is a think tank that was, pretty much pro the opposition MDC previously. So that's really, really interesting, because when I was in Zimbabwe recently, a lot of people were saying, well, it's a government of national unity, where they're all sharing power. And they're seeing that the opposition MDC, the Prime Minister's had to sack a lot of the members because of corruption. So you get the general Zimbabweans saying, no, well, hold on a minute, they're all the same. So how do we distinguish between the two? And so now they're looking at the policies, and they see that ZANU-PF policies are very, very pro-African and pro-indigenization. And so you can understand why that think tank came back with that findings, because ZANU-PF policies have been there for a very, very long time. It's just not all of a sudden. It's been there for many years. Mm-hmm. And so people are like, well, hold on a minute, especially the youth, they're thinking, well, we've got a chance with ZANU-PF. So at the moment, from what I hear, ZANU-PF is definitely in a stronger position than the opposition MDC. That's what I heard on the ground when I was there last time. And that's what, they were from my MDC friends, I might add.
So you're saying Mugabe has a good chance of just basically, living out his last days in office? Is that what you're saying?
Somebody sent me an email saying the other day it's by how much ZANU-PF will win by.
Oh, wow.
So I found that very, very interesting.
Mugabe seems like he's very much like a micromanager, if I'm not mistaken. That's what I got from the movie. Is he pretty much hands-on still? Or is he more of a figurehead representative at this point, since he got some of his policies already in place?
Well, it's always a collective effort. And he's definitely got his finger on the button. I can only talk about from the time when I was with him, and I always found that he was the sharpest mind in the room. Wherever we were across the continent, he was always on the button, the funniest and sharpest guy amongst all the younger presidents. And so, yeah, he's fully in control of his party and of government. That's for certain. But there's also, some capable people around him, that I'm told are doing a good job. Obviously, some can be doing better, as he will always say. I think there's an issue of just alleviating some of the issues of corruption, which a lot of people are talking about, and there's a big debate around in Zimbabwe at the moment. But when you're trying to kind of have a model of indigenization where you're trying to take control from the Western companies and almost include the indigenized person, there's going to be, that's a difficult implementation because it's new. And so, there's a lot of discussion how things should be done, and I think that's vibrant democracy. And being in Zimbabwe recently, there's a lot of discussions how certain things should be implemented. No one disagrees with the founding principles of the indigenization bill or the land reform policy. It's just ways and means for everybody to benefit from it, and I think that's healthy discussions, and just allows Zimbabweans to do it themselves. They don't need us to interfere or the West to interfere, because the more they interfere, it makes it worse for them on the ground. Allow them to do what they've got to do. They're far more capable than a lot of people think, let me tell you.
I'm asking this, too, because you talked about earlier about people outsiders buying up land or renting land in the African continent. Is the government of Zimbabwe, are they receptive to receiving Africans from abroad in terms who want to invest into the economy or into the land and businesses? Are they open to, Africans from abroad coming in to invest and do business?
My understanding is absolutely they are open to investment. But what's really important is the indigenization law that they brought in, where if you want to go and do business in Zimbabwe, the maximum ownership you can, in terms of shares, is 49%. You'll have to team up with an indigenous person who will own 51%. As long as you are okay with that, then you could go over to Zimbabwe and do business. Time and time again, there's too many people thinking that they can come into Africa and own 99% of whatever business they want, be it a mine, be it land. That's not right. The president said, no, you can't do that in Zimbabwe anymore. If you want to come in, let's work as a partnership. Don't come in and think you can own everything here. It's a partnership, and so no, Zimbabwe is very much open for business from what I saw.
That's pretty good. That's good to know. Cause one thing we're afraid. One thing I love about Marcus Garvey is that he understood the value of a unified African diaspora. I mean, like working, like, cut out the middleman. When I mean the middleman, I'm talking about the white European powers that be. We can cut them out and do business with each other. It shouldn't be, especially in this day and age of technology. I mean, we should be able to do some business. I mean, I think that's the whole point. And I think, it's time for you to wake up and realize that, we on this plantation, but the master, the quote-unquote white master, can barely take care of his own, let alone the slaves in the quarterhouses and whatnot. So it's time for us to try to get our self-determination on and really figure out what we need to be doing as a people, as a collective, as well as individuals to get this thing going in the right direction. I think that's very important. So what do you think would be I think I asked you this before. What is Robert Mugabe's greatest strength and what is his greatest weakness? I just won't get on racket.
Well, I guess it's just from my own experience, the greatest strength is to follow through whenever you get round to it. It's to follow through with your original dreams. So when they were fighting in the bush, the original dream was what? To regain the land that was forcibly taken from them. To be in control of their country and own their resources. Now, it might have taken a long time to get round to it, but he's fought through, and his kind of inner strength to get there, for me, is his biggest strength, his intellect and his tenacity and never say die attitude. At 89 years old, for goodness sake, never say die attitude is a huge strength. I don't think there's one single thing you can say what's his biggest strength. I think he's got a lot of strengths. Now, the weaknesses only come from people that tell me what they think their weaknesses are, and people say sometimes the weakness can be from not necessarily the man himself, but some of the people around him that are supposed to implement his ideals and his policies. So a lot of people that were kind of, anti-Mugabe, were kind of not anti his policies, but maybe anti how the policies were implemented, and maybe anti certain people around him. But you just really do notice the respect that Zimbabweans have for Mugabe. Those that if you like, or even the opposition. I interviewed many people from the opposition, and they just have this respect because they said, we are here because of the president. If it weren't for the president, we might still be under white supremacist rule. We may not even be as well educated as we are. We may not even have a chance to own our resources or have the land. So everybody, despite their political persuasion, has that respect for Mugabe in Zimbabwe. That's what I found, I shouldn't say astounding, but it was a big shock coming from London, hearing that from people, because I just never heard that view before.
And also, I was impressed, also the take of the white young Zimbabweans. I don't know how you say that. How you call them, Zimbabweans, yeah, like the young white ones. I was impressed with their perspective. It kind of reminded me of when Obama first ran for office in 2008, how the younger whites were really all into this concept idea of having a black president. Even when they're, the older whites wasn't too, they wasn't catching on to the idea too much. But I guess it was because of their exposure to quote-unquote hip-hop culture. So what do you think is the reason why a lot of young white people in Zimbabwe, or it seems like it, are open to Mugabe? They respect Mugabe.
Especially some of the whites that I spoke to, they look at the older generation and they say, well, that was then. We're the youth. We got to move forward. There's a whole load of, if you like, young people with different ideas, different philosophies, and know that they have to work together. This separation between black and white has not worked in the past. So white Zimbabweans are as proud of their country as black Zimbabweans. So they didn't like the negative media propaganda at all because it impacted on how they lived their daily lives. And so they would say to me also that the West never came to them. Western media never came to them and asked for their view and opinion. They'd always go to maybe a tramp in the street who was eating out of a rubbish tip and getting their views. So they were so open to being able to talk. They couldn't understand why the Western media who sneak into the country and who they saw often would never talk to them. Because they knew if they were to spout the views that they spouted in my film, that wouldn't look favourable in the Western media. Having white kids saying, hold on a minute, you guys are telling lies about our country. Now the Western media wouldn't dare do that. But I did do that. And that, I think, is a very powerful, that was a powerful bit in my movie.
Okay, that's well said. I'm just wrapping it up. I just want to get Sister Margaret. I think we lost her phone job. Sister Margaret, you there?
Yeah, well, I had to get on my other phone because it's dead.
All right, cool.
Yeah, I'm still here.
That's a good thing. Yeah, it's good. God bless you. But I want to get you, do you have anything else to say before we get off the air? Do you have anything you want to add or ask of him?
Yeah, where are you showing the film at over in Oakland tomorrow so I can tell Aaliyah?
We're going to be showing on the 4th of April at the Grand Lake Theatre in Oakland. That's where we're going to be showing the first screening of Mugabe, Villain or Hero on the 4th of April, the Grand Lake Theatre in Oakland. And there will be another showing on the 6th of April, but I can't be 100% sure of the venue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we can go to your website, MugabeVillainOrHero.com, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. Would you repeat that? Yeah. Ron, would you repeat that?
Oh, yeah, yes, ma'am. It's Mugabe, Villain or Hero, all put together.com. MugabeVillainOrHero.com.
Okay.
Yeah, we can go. Your online got all the updates, news, press release, promo for the film, everything you need to know. And also, people could go there to help actually book screenings for him as well. Like you said, he's making this sojourn around the states, trying to promote this very powerful film to everybody, especially every black person to see this film in the diaspora. Period. It should be recommended viewing. And hopefully, the organization, African Unity, have they reached out to you? The people that's doing the celebrations next month, have they reach out to you with interest in seeing the film, Brother Roy?
Who's that? Sorry.
The OAU. They're the people that are celebrating the anniversary of the OAU. Oh yes,
I'm hoping to be in Addis Ababa for the OAU. I think they're going to celebrate it on the 25th of May in Addis. I'm hoping to be there. Although I've been asked to come back to Harlem and do a screening there, it's I'm kind of
a lot of black love everywhere, huh?
Yeah,
a lot of black love. I understand.
Yeah, no, exactly.
You got to get it where you can.
You get it where you can. So if people want to set up a whole load of screenings in the US, I'm willing to say, okay, let the OAU event happen, and I'll be back here in the US and pushing it. But for me, it's just key to get it everywhere, Brother Ron. And I can't thank you enough for giving me, 2 hours now on your...
Oh, yeah, it's an honor, yeah.
Film. My brother, honestly, phenomenal. That, for me, is absolutely phenomenal for you to show me that love. Because, that's great, honestly.
I appreciate it, Brother Roy. You made an impression on me. Like I said, that film changed my life. That weekend changed my life. I don't know what all the repercussions of that will be, as life unfolds, but it's an honor to have met you, brother, and I look forward to promoting your cause. Like I said, I reached out to some people, and this radio show won't be the last thing I do on behalf of this important cause, man, that you have. And I just want to commend you, because brothers and sisters need to know what self-determination means. And, brother, you are self-determined. And, and the people will be blessed for receiving this gift from you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Brother Ron. Thank you very much.
So, Brother Roy, we love you, and the words of the great immortal Duke Ellington, we love you madly, man. We look forward to working with you again.
Thank you, Brother Ron.
Thank you. And Sister Margaret.
Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. It's been enlightening.
It is, Sister Margaret. Go ahead, Sister Margaret.
Oh, no, I was getting ready to tell you I'm getting ready to go because I'm watching Duke in Louisville.
All right. There it is, Mark Daniel. All right, Sister Margaret. I'll see you next week. We'll have a great show next week coming up as well.
Okay.
This is my take care.
Okay.
We love you madly, huh? And that's it for everybody for We All Be News and Radio. This will actually be available on demand at the same link you're listening to. And so we look forward to serving you all once again. It's our pleasure to serve the people. All power to the people. and have a happy Resurrection Day. Peace out.